This is my video reflection for the lesson I taught on using narrative techniques to understand historical events during the Civil Rights Movement and Reconstruction. To start the lesson, I tried to make the most out of our instructional time and asked Mr. Storm to give the pre-test the day before. This was really helpful because it allowed me to focus more on the reading, discussion, and writing portions of my teaching day rather than spending time on that. When I began the lesson, I read aloud an excerpt from Voices of Freedom. After reading, I modeled how to identify a narrative technique by giving the class one clear example from the text. Originally, my plan was for students to complete an annotation chart on Microsoft Word, but due to technical issues in making the chart, I just had them write paragraphs instead. They answered that question and then turned it in on Google Classroom. Next, students explored the Reconstruction part of the lesson. I had them open the Library of Congress link in Google Classroom on their Chromebooks and had them read some of the short stories provided on the website. We talked briefly about how these stories use narrative techniques to show different historical perspectives. Then students wrote their own first-person historical narrative modeled after the examples. They typed these also on a Word document and turned them into Google Classroom as well. Because of certain time constraints in the class period, I wasn't able to give as much immediate feedback as I would have liked. Ideally, I would have done a quick conference or at least given a few verbal reminders about strong narrative writing, but we had to move on to the final activity, which was the post-test, like the pre-test they took the day before. This assessment asked the same exact questions. They would read a different excerpt from Voices of Freedom and had them identify one narrative technique, explain how that narrative technique developed characters' experience, and describe the historical event that was being represented. This allowed me to compare their growth from the beginning to the end of the lesson. Overall, the lesson went well in my opinion, and the students were engaged through both the read aloud and the writing tasks. There were definitely moments where I had to adjust because of time and technological failure, but the students still gained practice with narrative techniques, historical thinking, and writing from different perspectives. Going forward, I would like to build in more time for feedback and maybe create the annotation chart ahead of time so that technical issues wouldn't slow us down.